Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear the first of a number of witnesses from the Tenant Management Organisation. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Members of the panel, good morning to you. I now call Teresa Brown, please.
Good morning, Ms. Brown. Welcome back, I should say. You're going to affirm, I think, is that right? And the words should be on the screen in front of you.
Sorry, yeah.
So when you're ready, perhaps you'd read them out for us.
Okay. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. That's it. Sit down, make yourself comfortable. All right? Very good. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Miller, when you're ready.
Ms. Brown, can I start by thanking you very much for coming to the inquiry yet again and assisting us with our investigations, this time into the matters, the subject of this module, the aftermath of the fire. Just a number of pointers by way of introduction. First, can I ask you please to try to keep your voice up so that the person who sits to your right and is typing there can get down everything you say very clearly. Also, don't nod or shake your head. You have to say yes or no.
Yes,
in the case
yes.
of P. If any of my questions are unclear, I can repeat them or put them in a different way. We can do that. That's not a problem at all. Now, you'll know that we take breaks in the usual way, mid-morning and mid-afternoon, but if we need a break at any other time, then please just let us know. There's no problem. We can take a break. All right? Now, you've made 6 statements to the inquiry, and I'm going to put them to you. They will appear on the screen. The first is TMO 1004890, dated the 21st of August 2018. We just have that up there. Page 3, please. Page 3 of that document. Don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah.
It always happens first thing. There it is. Now, there's a signature there under the statement of truth and above the date. Can you confirm that that is your signature?
Yes.
Thank you. Next statement is your second, TMO 50895, dated the 10th of January 2019. If we can turn, please, in that to page 5. Let's have the first page first. Page 1, first of all, to identify it. There it is. Page 5 next, please. There it is, above the signature, above the date. Is that your signature?
Yes.
Thank you. Third statement, TMO 1004892. That's your third statement, dated the 15th of March 2019. If we can go to page 10 in that, please. Is that your signature?
Yes.
Thank you. Fourth statement, TMO 008424402, dated the 4th of October 2019. If we can go to page 7, please. Is that your signature?
Yes.
Thank you. Fifth statement, which is your second aftermath statement, which takes in your first aftermath statement. That's at TMO 00869990, dated the 24th of January 2020. And that's your fifth statement, which I think is incorrectly identified as your fourth statement, but you correct that later. And if we can go, please, to page 18 in that document, there's a date, and 18 is the signature. The date's on the next page, but is that your signature?
That's definitely, yep.
Thank you. And then finally, your sixth statement, which is your supplementary aftermath statement at TMO 00894124, dated the 15th of December 2020. And if we can go, please, to page 34 in it, there's a signature above the date. Is that your signature?
Yes.
Have you had the opportunity to read all these statements recently?
Yes.
And particularly the last two on
Yes.
Aftermath.
Yes.
Thank you. And can you confirm for us that the contents are true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, you've given evidence to the inquiry, as you'll recall, I think, on two prior occasions. And in phase one of the inquiry, you gave evidence in relation to some of your actions on the night of the fire. What I'm going to do today is ask you about your involvement in the immediate aftermath in the week after the fire. Can I deal with some background matters first? You were the Director of Housing at the TMO at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire, weren't you?
Yes, that's right.
And you were in that role from February 2014, and you left it in June 2018, I think, as you
That's
tell us.
right.
Yes. And while you were Director of Housing, you were not a statutory director of the company, the TMO, were you?
No, that's
No.
right.
And nor were you on the board,
No,
nor were you a member of the executive team?
that's right.
Yes. And you reported to Sasha Jevons, yes?
Yes.
She was in the executive team.
Yes,
And she in turn reported to Robert Black.
That's
yes?
right.
Yes. Now, in relation to your professional background, I think you have qualification in housing and work for a number of arm's length tenant management organisations. Yes?
yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
And I think also local authorities. Yes?
Yes,
And in the role of management of housing services. I
yes,
think.
that's correct.
Let's turn then to the first of the topics I want to cover with you, which is about emergency planning and training at the TMO. You'll recall that the TMO had its own emergency plan. You remember that?
Yes,
Yes, and its reference, we don't need to go to it, is at TMO 100138898. Now, in your statement, your fifth statement, you say at paragraphs 6 and 7 that the TMO was not in operation, the TMO plan was not in operation on the night of the Grenfell Tower fire because it was designed for localised incidents and not an incident as large as the Grenfell Tower fire. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
Yes, and in paragraph 7 of the same statement, let's have that up. It's fifth statement, that is TMO 00869990, page 2, paragraph 7, you say, it was recognised that the TMO did not have the resources to be able to respond to such an incident, and that in such circumstances, the RBKC contingency management plan would operate as it did on the night of the fire. Further, it was recognised that in such circumstances, only one plan should be in operation, which is what occurred from an early stage following the fire. Can you confirm that? That's
Yes,
correct.
that's correct.
So then let's look then at the TMO emergency plan itself now, TMO 10013898. I'll show you the first page just to identify the document. There it is, and if we go to page 2, we can see the revision dates. Page 3, the revision dates. There they are. And you can see that it was last revised in February 2016, and before that in May 2015. If we go, please, to page 13, under the KCTMO emergency plan, it sets out the roles. And under the heading KCTMO emergency plan, this sets out the roles and responsibilities within the KCTMO in the event of a major incident major incident, which is defined as, and here's the definition, a major incident or natural disaster resulting in either death, injury, or serious disruption to normal life, which would acutely stretch the KCTMO's resources and which may ultimately overwhelm the KCTMO's capacity to manage without assistance from the Council. And just emphasising those last few words there, without assistance from the Council. Carrying on 2 paragraphs further down, the plan says that the plan is primarily for managing local KCTMO emergencies on, within, or surrounding our properties and estates, one which can be managed within the resources available to the KCTMO. However, this plan can also be used for large-scale major events which would overwhelm the KCTMO's ability to manage on its own and which would involve the RBKC Council resources. The difference being the scale of the emergency and the number of people affected by it. Now, I've read quite a bit of that to you. Do you agree, looking at it, that this emergency plan did in fact envisage a role for the TMO in the event of a major incident which stretched beyond the capabilities of the TMO, but where the TMO would be expected to work alongside the Council?
In that particular paragraph, it seems to imply that, yes.
Yes. And if we go to page 28 of the TMO emergency plan, from the fourth paragraph down, it says, ensure. Do you see the word ensure there? 4 paragraphs
Yes.
down. Ensure that residents' primary needs, i.e. shelter, food and warmth, are met as quickly as possible. You may need to open up a rest centre. Consult the block details to see what the most suitable location would be for this. Find out who the key holder is and make preliminary contact to advise that we may need to use the location as a temporary rest area. When opening up a rest centre, ensure that it is made as welcoming and comfortable as possible, i.e. by turning on the lighting and heating, arranging tea or coffee, turning on a TV or radio for entertainment, if available. Allow residents to use the KCTMA's mobile phone. Residents may be able to organise alternative accommodation by contacting their relatives or friends. And then arrange for a roll call to be taken and identify any special requirements, e.g. special needs or disabilities. Put someone in charge of organising refreshments. Depending on the numbers involved, 2 to 3 persons may be required to do this. Advise of any known vulnerabilities. Advise of any known vulnerable, less able-bodied residents that may come to your attention as needing assistance. Other than dealing with the immediate emergency, you will need to assess whether contractors need to be called for any making good, boarding up, security works, etc., as a result of the emergency. Now, there's quite a lot in there, but is it right that the TMO emergency plan envisaged that there may be situations that required TMO staff to open up and manage a rest centre, yes?
Yes, but I don't think they applied to the scale of the emergency that we had on the day of the fire. This is very much more small scale.
But are you saying that when a large event like the Grenfell Tower fire happened, the TMO would not be expected to assist in or participate in the opening up of a rest centre?
I think we'd be required to assist him, but I don't think in the instant of the scale of the fire that we would have been expected to open rest centres. In fact, the council seemed to have already taken responsibility that their emergency plan was in operation and they had that responsibility.
In the case of a major emergency, did you expect to have to wait until called upon by the council, who was the Category 1 responder, or did you expect to operate off your own bat and then join forces with the council as the emergency developed?
I would have expected the council to be in charge of the emergency and for us to sit in a supporting role within that.
Right. But when sitting in the supporting role, though, would you expect to be asked to support and be told precisely what the council wanted of you, or did you expect to come in and volunteer? I think probably we should have been asked to come in, but I think we also naturally, because we wanted to do what we could do to help, we came in. Now, even in the case of an emergency which is, you say, covered by this plan, would you use the rest centres listed in the RBKC emergency management plan where they're listed?
Well, I don't think that I'm saying that this plan covered the plan. I'm saying it dealt with more minor emergencies. I didn't expect us to be opening our rest centres on the day of the fire, because they would have been much more small scale. We wouldn't have had the resources to staff a rest centre of the scale that was needed.
Where it says in the paragraph I read to you, when opening up a rest centre, ensure it is made as welcoming and comfortable as possible. Which rest centres would you, which properties would you pick for a rest centre? Would it be those in the council's emergency plan, or would it be others?
No, it wouldn't be. The council emergency plan had, much larger scale rest centres, as I understand it. Ours were very small resident halls that wouldn't have a large capacity at all.
Did you have your own list of rest centres?
I'm pretty sure we did, but I can't say 100% now what they were.
Now, as you can see, the TMO emergency plan required TMO staff to undertake a number of roles, including arranging roll call for residents, which would in turn include identifying special needs or vulnerabilities. Is it right that the TMO staff involved in an emergency response covered, at least by this plan, should have been adequately trained and equipped to undertake those roles if the situation demanded it?
Yes.
Yes. And we'll come to training in a second. Can we go to page 17 of this document? This is a cascade chart showing who must be contacted in an emergency. Cascade 1 during normal working hours, and then Cascade 2 is on page 19, which is outside normal working hours, and the normal working hours are 9 to 5 a.m. to p.m., and outside working hours is 5 p.m. to 9 a.m., as you can see. Now, if we go back to page 18, please. We can see that your name appears in the central green box, Director of Housing, underneath the Customer Service Centre oval in blue, yes?
Yes.
Is it right to say that you were familiar with this emergency plan and what was required in the event of an emergency, such as the elements listed on the page we've looked at, page 28, opening rest centres, being aware of vulnerabilities, etc.?
So there were staff within our team who were specifically trained on the out-of-hours rota. So they're on the other document that you showed me. And I know that they all underwent quite extensive training with our health and safety team. That they knew how to call in things like bottled water or many other things that we may need in a small emergency, even maybe where people weren't evacuated, but to deliver water to people. So they did receive training. Right,
but what about those on this document who are...
Well, some of those are the same people. So Kieran and Martin... they would have, and Hash, they were on the out of hours team, so they would have had that training.
Right.
And we all would have had an overview.
Okay. Well, in terms of training, if we go to paragraph 3 of your 6th statement, TMO 00894-124, page 1. Yeah, if we go to paragraph 3, at the foot of the page, you say, I'm unable to recall receiving any specific training in relation to emergency planning and response during my employment at the TMO. Is that right?
Yes.
So if you were never specifically trained on emergency planning and response, what leads you to think that others were?
Because I know that they took... just trying to think of the word. They had more of a main role in responding to emergencies. There were specific people who received the training because they were more likely to be the people who were called out during emergencies. They were on rotas. They took on that role on a permanent, although a rotating basis. And I know that they received training.
Right. So but it's the fact, I think, that you never received any training about the TMO emergency plan, even though your details were contained within it as a contact. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's right.
Now, in this statement, you tell us over the page, well, picking it up at the foot of this page and then going over the page, you say, I'm so sorry, can we go back to page 1? Last line, last half of the line, you say, however, in my previous role at, turn the page to page 2, Hammersmith, I had worked in departments responsible for emergency planning and therefore was aware of how an emergency plan would be implemented, and expressions such as lay low, bronze and silver were familiar to me. What was your role at Hammersmith when you were in that position?
I didn't, I must make very clear, I didn't have a role for emergency planning at that. I was just part of the community safety team who also covered that role. So, I picked up knowledge of those expressions, but I didn't have a formal training of a council emergency plan.
I follow. Now, I think it's right, therefore, that at the time of the Grenfell Tower fire, you had not received any training at all in respect of, first, is this right, how to manage or provide support at rest centres?
No, but I had had practical experience of going to rest centres in my career before. I had a knowledge of what was needed and what was expected.
Right. Can you give us an example?
So I had obviously been present some way through the Adair fire, and in previous roles I had attended emergencies, nothing obviously like the scale of the fire, but you know, I had dealt with things like gas out and electrics out.
Yeah. So practical experience, but no training.
That's right.
Now, three other topics. Is this right? No training on identification and maintaining records of large numbers of displaced residents?
No specific training.
And how to support large numbers of displaced residents and facilitate return to their homes?
No specific formal training, but I would say again, you know, having spent years in housing, I have dealt with several emergencies that I think gave me, you know, some professional experience to draw on.
And was the Adair Tower fire in late October 2015 an example of that?
An example of that, yes.
Right. Were there other examples you could give of the same scale, similar scale to the Adair Tower fire?
Off the top of my head, not, but I've worked in housing a long time, and I've dealt with many different types of emergencies, but off the top of my head, I can't think.
But on training, I think, also no training on the identification of the needs of residents with specific vulnerabilities and how those needs should be met in an emergency response.
No specific training, but I would like to say some, you know, practical, some initiative, I think, that I drew on.
Were there any learning points that came out of the Adair Tower fire in respect of those matters? So dealing with displaced people, facilitating their return to their homes and identifying the needs of residents with vulnerabilities?
So I think there was some specific learning that came out for myself and Sasha, really, who were in that rest centre on the day, is that there was a lack of council presence in that rest centre. The lay-low had only arrived very briefly and had left site, and it was Sasha and I who were working in a rest centre that had been set up by volunteers. So, you know, and we had to work with somebody to rehouse people remotely. So, work with a council employee who was remote. Sorry, I wasn't very clear. To help assist in that. Sorry, I'm slightly lost in where I'm going. What was the question?
Well, let's see if I can be a bit more specific. Let's look at RBK 30577975. Now, this is a summary of a meeting on the 11th of April 2016 with contingency planning, housing and the KCTMO to follow up on the Adair Tower fire.
Yeah.
And you can see who was there. David Kerry was there from RBKC's contingency planning. You had three people from RBKC Housing, including Amanda Johnson and Celia Calliscan. And from the TMO, there was you and Janice Ray. Now, if you go, please, to page 3, you can see there homelessness as a result of the incident, and then an action point, 5 bullet points down. Do you see action, DK, AJ, TB, JW, and you're the TB there, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, and what it says is, in a future incident involving more than a couple of RBKC/TMO dwellings, the LALO or contingency planning team will attend the site and form a scene incident management group along with housing and TMO reps. And then the second bullet point down says TMO will provide details of known vulnerabilities. Did that proposal contemplate that the TMO would provide a list of people with known vulnerabilities involved in the incident who needed help, rather than generally across the whole TMO estate?
Yes, I took this to mean that We would be at the scene with our known list of tenants, and then we would work with the tenants and provide the information to RBKC on what the known vulnerability was,
Right.
so that we were capturing that live at the time.
Right. So the expectation was, as you say, at the scene you'd be able to have, is this right, immediate or reasonably immediate access to a list of people in the relevant building with known vulnerabilities so that you could provide it to the council?
Well, we would have known vulnerabilities, and I qualify that as at the time they were last reported, and then we would add to that from, speaking to our residents and understanding their needs.
Right. Just on the action point, was the action that you would prepare and collate these details in advance of the next incident, or was the action point that at the next incident you would provide the details?
So I understood it to be that at the next instant we would provide them, because if we just collated them at a point of time, they wouldn't necessarily still be
Right.
relevant.
Now, from what data did you have those details so that at the next incident you could provide them?
So we had on our capita system a list of all our residents and known reported vulnerabilities. So when we did our tenancy checks, there was questions in that around vulnerability, and after those checks had been completed, that information would be loaded onto our capita system. So that was the basis that we would draw on, and from our CRM system.
Yes, the CRM system. People will recall that from Module 3.
Yes.
And a question from Module 3 again. How often did you update the capita system or the CRM system so that you could be reasonably sure that the data pool was reasonably up to date and accurate?
So the CRM system, we had a single view, a first sheet, which was our resident contact details. So when people called into our customer service centre, we would try and verify the data on that, so contact details, things like that. Our main source for updating it would have been our tenancy checks, as I've just said, or residents reporting any updates to us directly, because obviously we were reliant on them to provide that information to us if their circumstances changed, and then we would update our systems.
And did you do anything, or to your knowledge, did Janice Ray do anything in response to this action point?
I don't think more specifically than anything else that was taking place at the time. So, we were progressing with tenancy, our tenancy check process, and obviously we worked very hard in the years coming up to the fire on our CRM system so that we could have more live data about our residents.
And you can see 2 bullet points down here that TMA will provide David Kerry with a copy of their emergency plan. This plan gives details for each tower block and estate, including details of any identified shelters. The date of this, of course, is April 2016. Do you remember whether, when considering this action point and acting on it, you or anybody else in the TMO looked at the emergency plan, details for each tower block and estate, noticed they were, in some cases, and in Grenfell Tower's case, 15 years out of date, and think to bring them up to date?
I didn't send over the emergency plan. It wasn't my role. Janice took that role, and I don't know whether she checked it. I certainly didn't.
Was there a discussion at the time, in response to this action point, between you and Janice Ray about undertaking that exercise?
No.
Right. Do you know whether this action point was, in fact, acted upon?
I know that she sent a copy of the emergency plan, yes.
Right. What about the attached details per block and estate?
I can't say with any certainty, but I would imagine if she was asked for it, she did.
Right.
Yes.
So can we take it then that this was a perfectly good opportunity to bring that emergency plan and its annexed set of details for each tower block and estate up to date as of April 2016?
Yes, it wouldn't have been my responsibility to do that, but yes.
Yes, but can we take it from you at least that opportunity was not taken?
I'm assuming from what I've seen since that it wasn't, yeah.
Can you explain why?
No, I couldn't explain.
What was the
Yes.
proposed line of communication between the TMO and RBKC's housing department to ensure that the information on vulnerable residents could be made available as soon as possible in the event of an emergency?
Sorry, what was the first part of that? What was the arrangement?
Yes, what was the line of communication contemplated between the TMO and the council's housing department?
So I think that would have been, a physical presence or an email version, depending when and where. It's more likely to be a physical presence, as we saw in Adair.
I see. And what about, other than as an incident, was there a line of communication where updated details on vulnerable people in a particular block could be channelled through to the council?
No, there was no regular sharing of our data into the council in terms of tenancy data or that.
Right. So would it work this way, that you would wait for an incident, and at an incident, the council would expect you and you would expect yourselves to be able to funnel through to whoever was in charge of housing at the incident
Yes.
the relevant data? Yes?
Yes, I would expect
I
that.
see. I want to ask you next then about some of the roles that you and other TMO staff undertook in the immediate aftermath of the fire. If we go back to your fifth statement, please, TMO 00869990, page 1, paragraph 3, you say there, I was heavily involved in many issues arising in the aftermath of the fire. Now, that's right, is it?
Yes, that's right.
So you stand by that. Now, is it right to say that that the key areas in which the TMO were involved were really threefold? And I'll count them out to you and tell me whether you agree or disagree. First, presence at rest centres. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Second, creating and maintaining lists of residents from Grenfell Tower and the evacuated walkway properties to identify who needed support.
Yes.
And then third, is this right, facilitating the return of residents to walkway properties?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Now I'm going to look at those, or invite you to look at those with me as we go. And let's look at rest centres. Now, I think it's right, isn't it, and tell me if this is right or wrong, that you became aware that rest centres had been set up, having been told of the fact by your colleague Hash Chamchoon just after you arrived at the scene, I think.
Yes, that's correct. I was there very early on. We've established at 3:50 in the morning, and yes, that's when I was told by Hash that the rest centres were open.
Now, I think it's right, isn't it, that the TMO staff were not themselves involved with setting up any rest centres?
No formal role in setting them up.
And if we go, please, to paragraph 6 of your sixth statement, page 4 of your sixth statement, that's TMO 00894-124, page 4, paragraph 13, you say this: I don't recall any direction being provided by RBKC on the role that the TMO should play at the rest centres at this early time of the morning, but I believe the BEC and RBKC officers Amanda Johnson, Laura Johnson and Rob Shaw were aware of what the TMO were doing during the day as we were liaising with them. So is it right that the TMO is entirely self-directed in this respect?
In the early stages, yes, definitely.
Yes. And how did you decide, or how did the TMO, to your knowledge, decide what the TMO's role at the rest centres was going to be?
So I don't think the TMO as a group decided. There was only myself, Robert, Hash and 3 team leaders. So I, looking at what was happening around me, decided that was the most practical thing that we could do, is to go to the rest centres and start to support residents and to try and collect information about who was safe and missing, so that we could get that to LFB initially in real time.
Right.
And then obviously there were other roles during the day.
Right.
Do you want me to elaborate now?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so our other roles during the day were to obviously take an account of who was safe and missing and who required accommodation, and we provided that information directly to RBKC so that they could assist with their housing obligation to rehouse residents.
Yes. And in terms of your specific role on the 14th of June, I think you went to the St Clement's Church, which had been set up as a rest centre.
I did. So I organised for the staff that I had at that time to go to different rest centres, and I went directly to St James's.
And was that the only rest centre you attended on that day?
Yes, that or I ever attended.
Right, yes, I see. Did you, just out of interest, did you work from the annex, which I think is Annex 14, to RBKC's contingency management plan, which had the list of approved rest centres on it?
No. We didn't consult. I didn't consult. Didn't have time to look at any annexes or documents. Hash told me that that was what was open because he would have had that information from the BEC, I assume, or the LALO.
I see. And you allocated TMO staff to various rest centres, I think, which included St Clement's Church, Latimer Road, or Latimer Church, Rugby Portobello Club, and I think also the Westway Centre.
Yeah, are you talking about immediately or during the course of the day? I did during the course of the day. We covered them all.
During the course of the day, not
Yes,
immediately.
yes.
Yes, I see. How did you know that those rest centres had opened?
Hash told me.
Right.
And we went around and found that to be the case. Whether they were formally opened or voluntary opened, they were.
And who was Hash Chamshoon's liaison at the council? From whom he would have got that information?
I don't know that, but he was stood next to me, so I assumed he had got outside the command unit. So I assume he had got that information from. I don't know who.
Okay. Now, what did you tell staff, the TMO staff, that their roles would be at the rest centres?
So I was very clear that they should go to the rest centres, that they should collect information around who was safe and missing, who was there, the names and addresses of people, and if they had any, particular needs and accommodation.
And as far as you were aware, do you know who had set these rest centres up? Was it the council or was it the community?
I think probably at this stage when I first went, the community.
Let's go to TMO 00869981. TMO 00869981. Yes, this is a list of TMO staff allocated to various rest centres, and this bears the timestamp on the left-hand side of the first column there, 0530 to 1400 on the 14th of June. It's entitled Staff Cover. And we can see who was allocated to the rugby club, St Clement's Church, the back office at St Clement's Church, the Methodist Church, etc. And at the bottom of the page, you can just see it, the Westway Sports Centre. In your sixth statement at paragraph 14, you say you don't recall the exact date that it was produced, but it was produced after the event, compiled from people's recollection of which TMO staff went to which rest centre on the 14th of June, and also the communications from the WhatsApp groups. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. My PA did it. She went to some of the rest centres on the day, and she had knowledge, and also from the very things you said, it was collected from that. Right.
Now, if we scroll to page 2, having seen page 1, which is Rugby Club and the others on the list, page 2 is 1400 to 2030. And again, you can see Rugby Club, St Clement's Church, back office, Methodist Church, Westway Sports Centre, and then over to page 3, the Latimer Christian Centre. And they're the same as the rest centres in the earlier part of the day. We can't see any reference there to allocation of TMO staff to other community rest centres, such as the Almanar Mosque and the St Francis of Assisi Church. Is that correct?
Yes, I wouldn't have known about them otherwise. These are the ones that I knew about.
Right. Was there no means of collating information for those who had gone to the Almanar Mosque, or was it simply the case that no TMO staff were sent there?
I didn't send anyone to those other places. No.
Did you know about them?
No, that's why I didn't send them to them.
But had you known about them, you would have done.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. If we then stick with this document and go back to page 1, please, we can see that in the time slot 8:30 a.m. to 1400 p.m. on the 14th of June, next to Rugby Club, it lists 18 staff members, starting with Mandy Warrior at the top of the list and going down to Robert Speak at the bottom. Would it be right to say that this is a cumulative total?
Yes, I wanted to explain that. This is, I mean, it says 5:30, but we were obviously there in some of those much earlier than that. But this is people who were there at some point of time. For example, Maria actually isn't on the rugby club, but she was very much there from about around 8:39 in the morning. So whilst I would say it's nearly, 100% accurate because of its source, people would have been moving through rest centres at different times during the day, and that's very much in our WhatsApp group. We use that to move resources around the day. But these are the bulk of people in the periods of time.
Yes, I see. And taking the rugby club as an example, how many TMO staff would have been there on average at any one time?
I think because this is a morning session, so I know we had Louise, Mandy, Maria there, and I would imagine this was the majority of people were there. They won't have been there at 5:30 because they were, we couldn't have got them there that early, but they would have been there, from normal working office hours, I would imagine.
Yes, and just taking that long list. Where were they recruited from, and what parts of the TMO organisation did they normally work in? So
I managed nearly 100 staff. So quite a lot of them would have come from my teams, but everybody across the organisation was willing to come and help. So you've got people from all sorts of different teams here, from our environmental services, from resident engagement, all sorts of people across the organisation.
Right. Did you select them, or did they volunteer?
I don't think we selected them. I certainly, I think people just naturally came very willingly to try and do what they could to help. I don't think we needed to beg or ask people. Our team leaders were there and, got up in the middle of the night. They were very much driven to come because they wanted to. I mean, I did, you can see in my evidence, I did ring my heads of service and get them to come in. So I did ask them specifically to go to a particular place. And then, because I had a team leader or a head of service in every rest centre, they, I think, helped to organise greater staff presence during the day when people came into the office.
Yes. And did you take any particular steps to ensure that those who were familiar with Grenfell Tower, the building, and Grenfell Tower, the community in the building, would be at a particular place? Or?
Well, I took Nicola Bartholomew with me first because she was the team leader in St Clement's. Sorry, she wasn't team leader. She was my team leader of the neighbourhood where Grenfell was. So I took her with me, and actually a lot of the local staff came to St Clement's during the day.
Right. And did you select particular TMO staff based on their knowledge of the community?
I took Nicola with me because I knew she would know the most about the area.
I follow. Now, Mark Sims, who was chief executive of the P3 charity, of which the Rugby Portobello Trust was a part, has given the inquiry a statement, and he says, and that is, there's no need to go to it, but it's at CFV 705, page 20, paragraph 93, and he says, in terms, there was no interaction with the TMO. Is that right, to the best of your recollection?
Well, I mean, I can't personally say I wasn't there, but we had a substantial amount of staff in the rugby club. When you read the statements of my staff, particularly Maria, who was there, you'll be able to see if she had any direct interaction with him. But I know that she describes being downstairs in the Rugby Portobello club, speaking to residents and then directing them upstairs to upstairs to where RBKC were later in the day to be rehoused. So that's what I know.
Is it possible that the TMO staff attending the rugby club were there but just didn't make themselves known to those who were managing the centre?
So I think what I did, and I'm certain that the other staff did this, is we tried to have tables quite close to the entrance of the door so that we could catch people coming in. That was a purposeful decision to to make our presence known. I do think people got confused between whether we were RBKC or the TMO or volunteers. I think, that did happen.
Right.
And, when you think about the fact that there were so many displaced people during the course of this day, there were nearly 1,000 people evacuated. So, the area was very busy. I can't account for why people say we weren't there.
Is it possible that one of the reasons is that you didn't have any kind of badge or tabard?
Well, I had my badge on from very early on all day.
But was it visible? Did it say TMO very clearly?
It's the ID badge that we use. I had it on all day.
But you were at St Clement's Church in the back office. What about those at the rugby club?
Well, I don't know specifically what they had on. I can't tell you. I don't know that. I don't know if they were all wearing them.
Now, is it right that you didn't allocate any staff to the Salvation Army Church Centre in Portobello Road?
No, I didn't.
Did you know that RBKC had established what is called a Friends and Relatives Reception Centre, or FRRC, in the lingo, from 3:30 on the afternoon of the 14th?
I found that out later from communication that I saw that was, informing us of where to direct people for support, but I don't think I knew that at the time.
I see.
I mean,
Now, Adrian Clee, who was the Grenfell Tower emergency response lead for the Salvation Army, has provided us with a witness statement. Can I just show you that? That's at CFV 6059. If we go in it, please, to page 3, paragraph 2, he says, our Salvation Army Church Centre in Portobello Road, the centre, was specifically asked by the local authority to open as a place of safety during the afternoon of 14th of June for individuals who were directly affected by the fire and relatives of those who were awaiting news. Were you made aware at any stage, I think you say you were, but when were you first made aware that the council had opened that place as a rest centre or centre for those directly affected or awaiting news?
So I think I noticed that in a communication that was circulated via our WhatsApp group that we passed on to our staff. Now, I don't remember exactly what time that was. It would be in my evidence, but there was a note that I saw at some point about the Salvation Army. I wasn't told directly by the council.
Were you aware of a Friends and Family Reception Centre being set up at any earlier stage? So that somebody in the position of, for example, Nabil Choucair, who's given evidence, could go and get news, or at least news that there was no news?
Not very early on. No, I was just aware of the main centres.
Now, let's then look at a slightly different topic, which is, or building on that topic, which is informing residents about rest centres. Can we go, please, to your fifth statement and go to paragraph 18? That's TMO 00869990. Fifth statement, page 4, paragraph 18. And it says this, in the third line, TMO staff were quickly mobilised to the rest centres as they opened and to where evacuees were directed. I do not know what arrangements were in place to inform residents evacuating Grenfell Tower and the surrounding properties of where the rest centres were located. I was not based within the police cordon. However, my expectation would be for the LALO to have informed the emergency services and for the emergency services to direct residents as they evacuated. Is it right to say that you don't know if evacuees were being directed, and if they were, where to?
So I wasn't, as I say here, I wasn't behind the cordon apart from to go to the command unit. So I wasn't allowed anywhere near the block. So I just didn't know. But what I did know was that the rest centres were filling with evacuated people. I saw that as soon as I went into St James's,
Right.
St Clement's.
Right, but in the light of what you say here, on what basis were you allocating staff to rest centres if you didn't know that residents would be looking for help?
Well, I knew that residents would be looking for help, and I knew that the rest centres were open. So what I'm saying here is that I expected them to be directed to them by the emergency services as they left the building, because I wasn't allowed to be in, that part of the estate. I wasn't allowed to do that myself. So all I could do was work from where I thought that they would be directed
I see.
to.
So did you or any other TMO staff take any steps to communicate with the lay-low or lay-lows within the cordon, or anybody else within the cordon, to make sure residents were told or advised about where they could go?
So my understanding is that when we decided to go to the rest centres, we were by the command unit. We were right next to the command unit. The information had come from Hash, and that they would, the BEC or the people in the command unit knew that that's what we were doing.
Were you aware that while some walkway residents were told by police to leave their homes, they weren't told where they could go?
No, I wasn't, and that's, obviously not good if that's the case, but I did know that, so from my point of view, I knew that the walkway residents, a lot of the walkway residents were coming to St James's. So at that stage, I probably thought the message had got to them that that's where they should go, because that's where they were, a large proportion were going.
Yes, I see. And what time was that?
So I got there, I think about 4:45.
Right. So residents were already coming into St James's from the walkways, even at that early stage?
Yeah, so, when I first got to the rest centre, I made it, myself and Nicola's job was to go around the people in the rest centre to see how they were, and, a lot of those at that stage were from the walkways.
Did you consider allocating some of your staff to work within the cordon with the Metropolitan Police, so that you could really both direct people on the streets to rest centres?
This was a heavily controlled area. We weren't allowed to go anywhere near the block. I had to come in and out of the cordon to go to the command unit, and I struggled sometimes, even with my ID, to get through there.
As the morning progressed, were you aware of any visual signposts, like posters or other messages in the area to direct people to rest centres, or giving out contact numbers for help?
I wasn't aware of any posters, but there may have been. I was very focused on what I was trying to do. I don't remember posters.
Let's look at the Westway then next. Can we go to your fifth statement, or stick with your fifth statement, page 7, paragraph 35? You say there, the situation about which rest centres were staying open changed during the evening. St Clement's Church chose to remain open, but I believe this was on a voluntary basis, as it was not an official overnight rest centre. The Westway was the designated overnight rest centre. That's correct, is it?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And you say during the evening, that's the 14th?
Yes.
And by designated rest centre, which is the expression you used there, do you mean that it became the central and official centre for support that would be run and managed by the council?
Yes, we got communication during the course of the day that we were to direct people to the the Westway overnight, because that would be the designated rest centre.
Were you aware that the Westway Sports Centre had opened in the early hours of the morning on a voluntary basis, and not an official rest centre by the council?
I'm not sure if I knew that at the time.
Right. Do you know how the Westway Centre became the designated rest centre?
I imagine that was the council organising that, more formally during the course of the day. Later on in the afternoon is what my view was, because definitely the communication we got was from the council.
And who at the council? Do you remember?
I think it was Amanda Johnston to start with, and then I think it was Rob Shaw. and we communicated that to our staffs in the rest centre.
You go on at paragraph 36 of your statement, as you can see, to say this: there was some difficulty persuading people to move from other rest centres to the Westway, in part due to the ongoing generosity of people in the rest centres where food continued to be provided. Donations of food and clothing had been generously flooding into all rest centres from the early hours of the morning. The number of people turning up offering to help was also large. Is it right to say that some people chose to stay at rest centres being run by the community rather than moving to the Westway Centre?
Yes, I think that's absolutely the case.
And
Yeah.
did that cause problems?
I think it was right for them to be where they felt it was best to be. I think all we were trying to do was to direct them where the council had said was the overnight provision, because it had been set up for that. But my feeling was very much is people would choose where they feel most comfortable.
And as part of that sense that you had, did you get a sense that in some way the evacuees preferred to be helped by community volunteers rather than by somebody in an official capacity? Well, the council.
I think people will, can say that for themselves, yes.
But did you get a sense from what you could see?
Well, I thought a number of different centres were being utilised. People just, chose whichever form of support that they, I guess, thought was most useful to them. And they felt comfortable.
I want to ask you then about accounting for residents at rest centres. Can we turn, please, to your sixth statement, paragraph 29? Did you say there at paragraph 29, foot of the page, foot of your screen, you say, I recall that RBKC housing officers attended at St Clement's Church on the afternoon of 14th June 2017 to provide direct rehousing to residents. My expectation is that they attended at all rest centres on this afternoon to provide assistance to residents identified as requiring rehousing. Now, by all rest centres there, are you referring to the ones listed on your earlier list we looked at earlier?
I think I meant that, yes, but I think actually they only had three main centres that they went to, which was St James's, Rugby and Westway. And also, a number of them closed during the day and people moved, so they may have directed the staff to the ones that they thought most people were there.
Right. And what about the Almanar Mosque? Can we take it that you didn't know whether, and perhaps don't know still, whether RBK staff attended other community rest centres, such as the Almanar Mosque?
No, I don't know. I do know that they were at Rugby and that they were at St James's and later the Westway. I do know that.
Okay. Now, at paragraph 37 of your fifth statement, if we can go back to that, fifth statement, TMO 00869990, page 7, you say at the foot of your screen there, I believe that by late evening on 14th June 2017, RBKC had managed to place the majority of people in hotels, or we had directed them to the Westway. Are you referring there to Grenfell Tower residents, or everyone who was evacuated, including Grenfell Tower residents, but also including the walkways?
I think I mainly mean Grenfell Tower, but I did know that by the end of the day they had housed some people from the walkways as well. But yeah.
Right. What was the basis of your information that RBKC had managed to place the majority of evacuees in hotels?
So we were obviously liaising with the council very closely during the whole course of this night and day, and we knew that they were placing people. We knew that they were placing Grenfell Tower residents as a priority, and then we knew that they were focusing on housing people from the walkways who were vulnerable or elderly or people with families. We knew that, so I had assumed that the majority of those people had been housed, and they were also asking for. Yeah, that's what I knew.
Right. Well, we'll come to the question of prioritisation in a moment. because I want to look at that in a little bit more detail with you. But just on the question of hotels, the inquiry has heard evidence from evacuees who were not placed in hotels on the 14th of June, and in some cases for significant periods. Did you know that at the time?
I do know that I knew that the next day because we followed up our work on the Thursday with phoning round people in Grenfell Tower.
I see.
I think some people weren't there. Obviously, some people were away. Some people chose to go and stay with other people. So I knew that there was, not a demand for everyone to be housed that first night. If I'm putting that the right way, I know there were some people that who wouldn't have asked for housing on that night.
Was it the case that people hadn't been contacted so that they could know what support was available at the rest centres?
So I know that myself and Kieran and other colleagues during the day tried to ring round everybody from Grenfell Tower who we hadn't caught in the rest centres. We tried to phone them on several occasions during the day so that we could give them advice about where to go and to check that they were safe.
Right. Who did you try to phone?
All the people who hadn't reported to the rest centre during the course of the day, and you can see there's a document which is our tenancy list where we've matched basically those who we thought were safe and missing, and on the left-hand side of that document, whatever it is, there's a column that shows where we were phoning around people to see where they were.
Right. And were there instances of people using rest centres that did not have an RBKC presence, organising accommodation?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yes. And was it the case that people were not put in hotels because they were using rest centres, which were not RBKC rest centres?
I don't know that, but I know that some people were put in. No, I don't know the answer to that.
Now, turning to the question of prioritisation, can we go please to page 6, back a page of this statement, and look at paragraph 28. And you say there, RBKC, paragraph 28, 4 lines down, RBKC's housing team were focusing on booking Grenfell Tower survivors into hotels initially. That's right, is it?
Yes.
That's what you say. But if we go, however, to paragraph 32 of your statement at page 7, this statement, page 7, you say, RBKC advised us to tell residents displaced in the cordoned-off areas, including Grenfell Walk, Hurstway Walk, Testerton Walk, Barrington Walk and Treadgold House, to go to rest centres where they would be accommodated overnight if the cordon remained in place overnight, whilst those who were elderly, vulnerable, children were accommodated by RBKC. Teams on the ground were advised of this. Was there a strategy prioritising Grenfell Tower survivors for emergency accommodation over residents from the area inside the cordon other than the tower?
I think there was in terms of early in the day, I think there was, the priority was housing Grenfell residents first.
Right, and how was that organised?
The council organised that.
Do you know how they organised, what system they used?
Well, I know that they did a lot of bookings early in the morning of hotels, and then I know that they came to the rest centres, and we had been advising them through exchange of data during the day of people who were safe and missing, people who were in the rest centres, and they then came to the rest centres and did the physical booking of those that accommodation for the residents.
Right, and when they were doing that, prioritising the Grenfell Tower residents in the way you've described, did they have up-to-date data, or so far as was possible, up-to-date data about who was vulnerable?
They had up-to-date data from, they had the data that we had on our tenancy database, and I know that they were making their own assessments of people when they were doing bookings. They were doing detailed assessments of every individual when they were making bookings from the rest centre. And
when they were making their own assessments of people when doing their bookings, what criteria were they using, to the best of your knowledge?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't know.
I mean, do you know whether any attention was given by RBKC to whether the hotel accommodation being proposed for evacuees from Grenfell Tower was suitable for the particular needs of those evacuees?
I don't know that in any detail. I do know that they were trying to match it with the needs of the people that, that they had. Sorry, I'm not saying that right at all.
No, I understand.
You get the gist of it.
Yes, I think that's clear.
Sorry.
I think to be clear, so far as you knew, they were trying to match hotel accommodation with the
needs.
vulnerability data that you thought they had.
Well, no. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that, so it's worth us clarifying. I'm saying is that we had given them that information, and I thought that they were making their own assessments at the point of booking people into the hotels about their particular needs. So they were getting their live data from, how it was on the ground at the time.
I see. And was there any information sharing between the TMO and the council about vulnerable persons and their needs?
There was sort of constant information sharing. So we gave them the tenancy list, which had a list of what we had known as vulnerable at that stage, and that was shared with them.
Now, Westway, can we go please to your sixth statement, page 13? Where you tell us, paragraph 46, that you did not attend the Westway Centre on the 14th of June or during the subsequent period of its occupation. I think we've seen, though, that there was a rota of TMO staff to provide support to the evacuated residents who were there. Yes?
I think that's a snapshot of the rota, though. I think that's a rota at a point in time, because we had staff in the Westway from the day of the fire until when eventually we were asked to leave attending.
Given that the Westway Centre had become the central place for support, why didn't you attend on the 14th or after the 14th of June?
Because I was busy doing a variety of other things, and we had a rota of staff who were very capable and confident to be there, and I didn't think I needed to go there.
Right. What support was provided to the TMO staff that were assigned to the Westway Centre to enable them adequately to support, in turn, the needs of the survivors and residents?
So we had daily briefings back at the office. I organised daily briefings to make sure that all our staff were, we were sharing information as we knew it, because everything was moving very fast. So we made sure that we exchanged information on a regular basis. You can see that through our statements. You see, I'm sure we'll go there later. But so we briefed our staff, and they were aware of the services of other agencies within the Westway. So they were aware of who they could, direct people to if they came to their desk. Right.
And on the 14th, at least, what were the other services of the other agencies within the Westway?
There was a list, I remember, that was circulated on our WhatsApp group fairly early on the day, I believe, and that listed the full range of services. So there was mental health support. I'm sorry, just gone blank. A full range of services. Right. Housing were down there, RBKC housing were there. Sorry, just gone blank on that.
I think it's right, isn't it, as you tell us in your statement, your sixth statement, paragraph 47, that there was no physical TMO presence on Saturday the 17th and Sunday the 18th of June, the first weekend following the fire.
So this is something I think I'm a bit confused on, because I think it's possible from reading the statements that Mandy, Olivia or Hash may have been there. It certainly wasn't intentional that we weren't there, and we were doing a variety of other things. But I can't say 100% if we were or not.
Right. Do you know how many evacuees were in the Westway Centre over that weekend?
No, I don't know that.
Do you know who was protecting them or catering for their needs, such as washing, changing facilities, grief, prayer? Or
I
just
know that,
privacy?
and they were all the things that I should have been able to tell you were at the Westway a moment ago, but other organisations were providing that support.
Right.
We knew that Rob Shaw was there as well, and we were in telephone contact with people. But I can't say 100% that we weren't there.
Do you remember whether you or anybody else from the TMO team was in contact with the HASG, the Humanitarian Assistance Steering Group, or anybody from Humanitarian Assistance at the Westway over that weekend?
I just said I can't remember 100% whether we were.
Did you yourself at any stage have any contact with the HALO, the Humanitarian Assistance Liaison Officer?
No, I didn't.
No. Had you heard of that role? Was that a role?
No,
No?
not before.
Nobody told you that somebody called Sue Redmond from the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham had taken on the role of HALO from the 15th of June?
I don't remember that. No.
Mr. Chairman, we're about to come to a new topic.
Yes, would you rather break at that point?
I think it's sensible to break at that point, if we can.
Well, Ms Brown, that's obviously a good point to have our morning break, so we'll stop there. We'll, we'll resume these at 11:30. And as you know, I said it to you on the previous occasions, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it while you're out of the room. All right? Thank you very much. We'd like to go with the usher, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Millett. 11:30 then, please. Thank you. Would you ask Ms Brown to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Mr Brown, all set to carry on?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I now want to ask you about the safe and missing residents list that the TMO created and maintained in the period after the fire. And first I want to look at the list of persons from Grenfell Tower itself. Can we start with your sixth witness statement, please, which is open in front of you on the screen, I think, at the moment, and go back in it to page 6, paragraph 19. Page 6, please, paragraph 19. Yeah, can we please turn the page to page 6? Thank you. Paragraph 19. You say there, prior to this is the second line. Prior to mobilisation of TMO staff to rest centres, I asked them to identify which tenants and leaseholders were present at their centres and to collate information on those who were missing. The reason why I did this was to try and provide information to the LFB to help them identify which residents remained missing. So that's correct, is it?
Yeah.
Yes. Was that task directed by RBKC?
No, I don't remember where it was tasked from, really, but I don't think it was by them.
Right. Given that that is, or might have been the case, that you weren't tasked by RBKC to undertake that role, why did you do it?
Because I think when I was standing in the command centre, it seemed a very practical thing that I could do to assist. I knew that it would be important, and therefore I set about doing that.
I see. So you volunteered it?
I think so, yeah.
Did you get any kind of direction on the type of data that should be collected from the survivors and those being evacuated from the tower, or about how to collate or organise and store that information?
I don't remember getting any direction from anybody about it.
Just to be clear, is it right that this process was in relation to the Grenfell Tower residents as opposed to the residents who had been evacuated from the walkways and Treadgold House?
Yes, at this stage, yes.
At this stage. Now, if we stick, please, with this page and go, please, at the foot of a little lower down to paragraph 20, you say this information was initially recorded on pieces of paper brought to me at St Clement's Church or in the vicinity of that area, which I then relayed to the LFB at the command unit. LFB photocopied the pages and gave them back to me, etc. Then you explained that there were handwritten lists provided to Kieran, who put the information on spreadsheets on the laptop. And then you say this information was shared via email with the BEC, RBKC, LFB and the Casualty Bureau at Met Police, amongst others at various times during the day as it was updated. Is it correct that initially this information was used to give to the LFB to help with rescue efforts?
Yeah, I hand-delivered the information on those who were missing to the LFB from a very early stage.
And was it the case that thereafter the TMO continued to update the safe or missing persons list and then circulate it to a number of agencies?
Yes.
Including
yes,
RBKC?
That's correct.
Right, and for their purposes, is this right, to help them identify who needed emergency accommodation?
Yes, it was telling them who was safe and missing, and also, yes, it was used to identify who needed accommodation.
Do you know whether the Casualty Bureau, which had been set up at about, I think, 6:30 a.m., was using those lists to help them with their inquiries? coming in from those who were looking for their loved ones?
I know that we certainly sent it to them. I don't know what they did with it, but we updated that list several times during the course of the day, I think maybe 5-6 times. And we did send that information to Casualty Bureau, definitely, and always to the BEC and RBKC.
Right. And
yeah.
yeah, did you appreciate when you did that those agencies, I call them agencies, but the Casualty Bureau, the BEC, the Council would be relying on that information in delivering their own emergency responses?
I thought that they would be using it as a base and to a certain extent relying on it, but I did expect people to, during the course of housing people and further conversations, during the course of the few days, for people to use that as a base and add to it.
Did you think at the time that it was a role best carried out by the TMO, or did you think that it was a role better undertaken by RBKC as the official responder?
Well, I don't think I knew in detail about the Red Cross links and that the Red Cross did have a system of collecting data themselves. So I don't think I knew that at the stage that I started it.
Looking back on it now, is it your view that it would have been a role better suited to RBKC?
Well, I don't know. RBKC, I don't know. They weren't there at the time. They weren't there at the early hours in the morning. They weren't there at 4:45 when we started collecting the information. So I thought it was best that we get on with it, I think, which was most in my mind.
Now, you say in paragraph 21 that you were responsible for the process in terms of asking for the information to be collated by TMO staff. Were you satisfied that the staff you allocated to the various rest centres were equipped to deal with that task?
I think they knew exactly what we needed. I'd communicated to the plan to them, and I think that they... And if you look at their statements, to me, it's very clear, thankfully, that we're all saying the same thing, that we knew what we were doing. There's a task in hand. And whilst it was on pieces of paper, there was definitely a process that we were going through to upload those to the spreadsheet.
Now, that process, was it a pre-existing process, or was it a process cobbled together on the day, but which, so far as you were concerned, worked?
Well, it was a process that I directed on the day.
Was there any training given to your staff on how to undertake that process?
Not specifically, but they were used to dealing with residents, obviously not in such awful circumstances, but no, there was no specific training about rest centres specifically on collecting that. But they were clear on what was being asked of them.
I just want to show you what Mandy Warrior has told the inquiry in her witness statement. Can we go, please, to TMO 100-48986? Page 4, if we can go to that, paragraph 17, she says, Teresa instructed me to go to the reception centre that had been set up at the Harrow Club. When I got to the Harrow Club, the manager of the club essentially abdicated all responsibility for the reception centre to me. I began greeting people as they entered the centre, making a note of who they were and what they needed. I also made a list of any people who were allegedly missing. And she carries on at paragraph 18. I recall feeling like I wasn't the right person to be running the centre, as I had not received any training on running a reception centre. However, I had no choice but to carry on. Given the importance of the task to identify safe and missing residents, why were staff members who were not confident in undertaking this role, as she apparently wasn't, asked to do so? Well,
I don't think she should have been asked to run a rest centre. Isn't what I sent her there to do. I asked her to get a list of the safe and the missing.
Right. Did you have a conversation with her on the day or a later day about her perceptions that she reflects in paragraph 18 there?
I don't remember simply discussing it. I think she is, if you look at all the other statements, I don't think any of the other staff had a difficulty with what they're doing. Mandy had volunteered. She came in the middle of the night to try and do what she could do to help. I did send her other resources. And I think that's all I could do at that time. And we obviously sent more people later on, and she in fact moved to the Portobello Rugby Club. So she will have been supported by more staff as the day went on.
Yes, and we saw her name certainly on the 5:30 a.m.
Yeah.
1400 slot at the top of the list at the Rugby
Yeah.
Portobello Club. When allocating staff to rest centres and asking them to undertake this role of recording safe and missing residents, did you consider at the time whether they were adequately trained to do so?
Do you know, on the day, no, I did not think that at all. They had come to site because they wanted to do something to help. I didn't question what, they didn't question what they were doing. They were willing to go there and do what they could to help. So this certainly wasn't the feedback I got from Mandy at the time. She was, she worked tirelessly in many days and weeks following this, as did other staff. So.
Were any of the staff deployed to rest centres trained as rest centre managers?
No, none of our staff were rest centre managers. That would have been an RBKC thing to be trained as a rest centre manager. We weren't formally trained.
Right, just to be clear, is the answer no, they weren't trained, but equally they didn't actually perform the role of rest centre managers?
They definitely weren't rest centre managers. It was RBKC's role to deploy rest centre managers, which they did in the evening.
And until the evening, before the evening, who filled the gap?
Well, I don't think that I saw my staff role ever to be rest centre managers. They were there to assist with collecting the information that I'd asked them to go there and to support residents. I didn't ever see that they would be in charge of rest centres. They were an additional resource.
And when providing the additional resource, was it your view that they were doing so under the TMO's emergency plan or just as a matter of voluntary conduct?
I don't think I had time to think about which capacity they were doing it, just that they were there doing what they could to assist.
Now, let's look next specifically at the process of creating and developing the safe and missing residents list. Initially, I think the information, as you say, was recorded by staff as handwritten notes. You tell us that at paragraph 20 of your sixth statement, which we've seen, and then your Kieran, is this right? Your colleague Kieran Singh arrived at St Clement's Church and began recording it in a spreadsheet. Yes.
Yes, that's right. I'd asked him to bring the laptop.
Yes. Now let's look at how that was done in detail. Can we look at his supplementary statement, please? TMO 00894410, page 1, paragraph 3A. He says, I originally received a full tenancy list for the Grenfell Tower from David Noble in the form of a spreadsheet. I understood that this had been extracted from Capita and detailed the names, addresses and contact details of tenants. The extracted list was used as the starting point for the list of safe and missing residents from Grenfell Tower. Does that accord with your understanding, Ms Brown, of how the spreadsheet was developed?
Yes.
And if we go to your fifth statement, TMO 0089869990, fifth statement, page 5, paragraph 25. Thank you. You see there, you exhibit TB5. It's just halfway down the paragraph. And you say that includes, with an email attached with a list saying current resident list, which he then emailed to the Beck Casualty Bureau, Essex Police, Amanda Johnson, you and Robert Black on the 14th of June at 12:21. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Let's just go to that then. TMO 00869930. It's from Kieran Singh to all those people, including you. Subject, current resident list. Hi, current list of safe and known missing residents of Grenfell Tower. This is a working document which is being updated constantly, so we will provide further updates during the day. And note the time, 12:21. And let's look at the spreadsheet, which is attached. As you can see, resident list as an XLS, which is a spreadsheet. It's at TMO 00869931. Can we have that open, please? We'll need the native for that, please. That's TMO 00869931. Now, you will see from the foot of the screen that there are 4 sub-tabs in the spreadsheet. There's general, there's safe, there's missing, and there's something called sheet 4. Now, is it right, looking at Kieran Singh's evidence about how this list was generated, that the general tab represents the extracted full tenancy list that he describes?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, yes, that's right.
Yes, and if we open general, I think you can see it. We just open general up and scroll down, you can see, well, everyone can see what that list looks like. Now, if we go, please, back to Kieran Singh's statement at paragraph 3b on page 2, this is TMO 00894410, page 2, paragraph 3b. And we're going to come back to this document in a minute, so don't let it go too far away. He says at 3b, on page 2, from my understanding, this document reflected all known occupants of each property at the Grenfell Tower rather than just the registered tenant. As the data contained in this document had been extracted from the TMO's system, it would have reflected and recorded the exact information provided by a tenant about a change or update in their household occupants. Now, that's what he says. Can I next show you what Shamshun says in his statement, TMO 10048972, page 4, paragraph 12. TMO 10048972, page 4. He says, we need page 4, please. Yes, thank you, paragraph 12. He says, halfway through the paragraph, he says, TMO held details. Do you see that?
Yep.
TMO held details of the registered tenants and leaseholder for each flat, but it did not hold details of the occupants, family members and visitors. This information was constantly being updated as information became available, and my understanding is regular updates were given by others to the fire brigade and police in order to identify those who remain missing. Now, based on your understanding, did the general list that I've shown you, compiled by Kieran Singh, contain details of registered tenants and leaseholders of Grenfell Tower, or was it a list of all household occupants?
I think it was a mixture, and I think it was dependent on when people probably started their tenancies. So if you look back at the list, some of it is just a tenant, a lead tenant, and sometimes it's the household members. You see it repeated, 2 or 4, might be 3 or 4 times if there were 4 occupants. So it's a mixture of both, and we would only know the leaseholders' details, not the subtenants' details on that list.
So right, and was that something you knew at the time when Kieran Singh was compiling his list?
Yes, we knew that. Yeah, you could see.
So is this right? Your baseline then for identifying who was in the building on the night was not necessarily accurate.
So I think it's as Kieran has said in his statements, as Laura referred to last week, our information about our tenants is only as accurate as the last time it was recorded. It's a snapshot in time. So information is taken when a tenancy signs up, when you do a tenancy change, when a tenant reports a change to you, and then you can update the information. So at any point, I think we all understand that it's never going to be 100% accurate, because it is also dependent on people giving information to you.
Mm. So you might actually have a flat where the identity and characteristics of the occupant was completely different from what is contained on your list.
I wouldn't expect to see many occasions where it was completely different. I wouldn't expect that to be completely different, no. It would be in the case of leaseholders. I know that we did find, people had sublet their property and there were different occupants completely in the case of leaseholders.
Were you confident at the time that the list, the general list at least, represented everyone who needed to be accounted for?
Well, no, I think we understood that there would be people in the building on that night who weren't registered tenants, who were either staying or, we knew that there would be other people. All we could use was the base that we had, and it was taken from Capita on the day of the fire, so it was the latest registered information that we had.
Can we go to TMO 100355581? I think you've probably answered this question, but let's look at what's said. It's from Robert Shaw at RBKC Housing to Kieran Singh and you at 1442 on the 17th of June, which was the Saturday afternoon after the fire. Quick question. Do we know roughly how many residents, not just lead tenants, were in the tower? Been asked this by a Red Cross volunteer. First, presumably that was a question in your mind, was it, right from the start of the fire?
Yeah, that's why I was always concerned about the reliance on just using the tenants list, the tenancy list, because that wouldn't be the up-to-date account of people who would then be in there. It would be, more or less right, but there would be other occupants that night. There would be people who were away, there'd be people who'd had children that weren't told about. It's a fluid thing. We wouldn't know at any particular point in time 100% who was in the tower on the night.
Yes, and indeed, we look at the response to this email a few minutes later at TMO 100355581. This is Kieran Singh's response to Robert Shaw at 1448 on the same day, 17th of June, and he says, second email down, 231 people, tenant and household members, not any visitors that we were aware of from our IT tenancy records. This should be on the updated Grenfell safe list I sent yesterday. Obviously, this is not likely to be 100% accurate, as households have changed over the years and we have not always been told. So I think that makes the point, doesn't it? That at the time you were aware that the safe and missing list was based on an inaccurate or incomplete.
I would say
baseline.
Incomplete, not necessarily, incomplete. There's always that danger.
Yes.
And it really is, it is a partnership thing working with residents, isn't it, to make sure that we have as much up-to-date information as we can.
Yes. Did it occur to you at the time, therefore, that the agencies who were being sent this list were relying on that information, incomplete though it was, to offer support to those affected?
Well, I think, what we were also doing was identifying the safe and missing, and we were trying to collect information about sort of other people who may have been there too. But yes, principally the list was being matched against the tenancy list. That's right.
And do you accept, therefore, that meant that there were residents who would not have been accounted for and therefore not contacted?
Yes, but we could only work with what we had at the time, and we tried in various other ways to contact people, not just using the data on this day.
What steps did you take in other ways to contact people, other than in reliance on this list?
I suppose we would have used it as a basis, but we did go to the rest centres. So if we became aware of anyone in the rest centre, we would have, who wasn't necessarily on the tenancy data.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I do, I've looked at some of the evidence, and I've seen, for example, leaseholder who had sublet to 3 people. Now, we didn't know those sub-leasees' contact details. We contacted the lessee and saw if he was all right, but he then had to make contact with the subtenants. That was the only way we could do it. I mean, it is complex.
Yes. But using the information from people in the rest centres, so then how would it work? You would find out who they were, try and match them with those on the general list. And then
that's
if
right.
they weren't on it, what would you do? Would you ask them questions? Who else in the tower was in the flat?
Yes, and that was the point of trying to get the live data.
And did you raise this problem about the incomplete nature of the baseline list with RBKC?
So RBKC would have been aware of that, and Laura Johnson, I saw her evidence the other day. She's aware. Most people who work in housing are aware of the complex nature of keeping data up to 100% accurate.
Did anybody from RBKC contribute to the development or maintenance of this list of safe and missing residents on or from the 14th of June?
So there was a constant exchange of this data, even up until the 21st, 23rd of June. We were trying to match it eventually with who had been placed in hotel accommodation, and we were sharing that with the council. So I also knew that they were, booking residents in directly, so they would have got additional information from that process and added to the information in the tenancy list.
I want to ask you next about how this list was updated during the course of the 14th to start with. Can we go back to your 6th statement, please? 6th statement, paragraph 22 on page 6. And you say there that TMO staff at each rest centre were asked to bring the information to me initially and subsequently to Kieran so that this could be added into the spreadsheet to ensure the information was consolidated into one spreadsheet to avoid confusion. I know the caretakers, estate service assistants, ESAs, I think has been referred to elsewhere, had a role in bringing this information to us from the rest centres. It is possible that staff emailed or phoned this information through to Kieran as well if they could not physically attend at St Clement's Church. Kieran also communicated with staff via the WhatsApp group established. Now, if we look at paragraph 24 of your statement, please, on page 7, you say there, in the last sentence, 3 lines down, there was no set format for recording this information. Rather, staff used whatever resource was available in their rest centre to do this. Now, taking those together, can we proceed on the basis of what I've just read to you from these 2 paragraphs of your statement is correct?
No set format for recording it, as in we recorded it on pieces of paper, but there was a plan for what was done with that.
Right. Well, let's then look at a number of documents. Let me show you first TMO 100352210. Is this an example of a handwritten note taken by TMO staff at a rest centre?
It looks as though it is, yeah.
Yes. And you've got Jessica, 12 to 13, 20th floor, Urbano Ramirez, missing there, yes? And others listed. Let's look at another one. I'm just going to show you 2 or 3 examples. TMO 100352236. TMO 100352236. And you can see on that one, halfway down, 115, Grenfell Tower, Zainab Dean, recorded. What does the word recorded mean in each case?
So that means that we would have put them onto the spreadsheet.
I see. And then another one at TMO 100352242. And you can see the names there. And somebody who needs rehousing, you see Merrin Mekkanen and Johannes Teste, needs rehousing, flat 163. Same with Huot Dagnachu and Wintom Temesgen. And then last one, at TMO 100352218. You can see next of kin and friends, and who was missing and who was safe. You see that in the right-hand column, missing and then safe, safe, safe.
Yeah.
Did you have any concerns at the time about the accuracy of collating the information on safe and missing residents in this way?
No, I thought, well, I mean, when you're in those kind of circumstances, there's obviously a margin of error, but I thought we had a process. I thought staff were clear about what they were doing, and I thought it was the best way to collect it.
And who was it who was reporting the missing? With these
So-
relatives?
It could have been, yes, relatives or anybody else were going into the contact into the rest centres and providing the information to us.
And then if we go to your sixth statement again, please, page 5, so back a bit in your sixth statement, page 5, paragraph 16, you say, you correct a typographical error, and then you say, paragraph 16, I apologise, I'm looking at paragraph 18. 16, upon arriving at St Clement's Church, myself and Nicola Bartholomew began speaking with the residents who had gathered there, introducing ourselves and taking details of anyone there. There weren't many residents there to begin with, but then I recalled that it really filled up. We took details of residents as they arrived, and we gave regular announcements, asking all residents to register with us so we could account for them. People also advised us of relatives and friends that they could not find, and we added them to our list. Now, you've confirmed that in your evidence earlier this morning that this statement is correct. So can we proceed on that on the basis that that's what you did?
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's look at what Claire Richards says in her statement. She was chief executive of the Clement James Centre at the time of the fire, and you find her statement to the inquiry at CFV 6012. And if we go in that, please, to page 13, paragraph 89, which is a long paragraph, and she says this: the TMO staff wrote information on scraps of paper, and they didn't appear to have a system. They didn't seem to be capturing an accurate record of everyone that was arriving at or leaving the site and who they were looking for. I offered on a number of occasions for our staff to assist the TMO staff and the use of laptops to capture all the information on a spreadsheet. They always turned down this offer. I therefore asked some staff to go around the site, ensuring we had everyone's information on our spreadsheets, including their address, whether they were missing anyone, and if they had somewhere to stay. And I asked the staff on the entrance to the church to note down who was entering and direct them to the TMO table and to make a note of anyone who was leaving. A member of the TMO staff saw that we were doing this and asked for our records, as she said that only they should be collecting this information, and it would be very confusing if there were more than one list. We handed over all the records. As the TMO continued to record their information on scraps of paper with no clear system, with the potential to miss residents, I continued to offer the assistance of our staff team and laptops. They repeatedly turned down this offer. They didn't return our records from that morning. Now, just looking at the last two sentences there, is that correct?
I don't remember being made offers of laptops. What I do know is that Kieran arrived at site at 8 o'clock in the morning, so from quite early on we had a laptop. Yes, we were using, I wouldn't call them scraps of paper, we were using pieces of paper, but we did have a method, we did have a plan. We would have not wanted to start recording, information on a different database. I really felt that we needed to put it onto the one spreadsheet so that it was, the margin for error was minimised as much as it could be.
And what do you have to say in response to the concern expressed here that the TMO was not capturing an accurate record of residents?
So, I mean, as I've said in my statement, we went round the rest centre. We were there before Claire was, to be fair. We went round the rest centre. We tried to catch people when there were enough numbers to do that individually. That's how we started. We then set up a table near the door so that we would be as close as we possibly could so that people couldn't avoid us. Not that they would avoid us, but they couldn't miss us is the word I really mean. After that, we did phone rounds as well to try and catch people. So, yes, we may have missed some people. Despite our best endeavours, we may have missed some people. But I thought we had a process in place that was as efficient as it could be. And I think Kieran confirms that in his evidence too.
Did you repeatedly refuse the offer of assistance from the Clement James Centre for the use of laptops?
I wouldn't have wanted people to start recording things on different laptops because then we'd have had to amalgamate it all. That would have taken more time. Just wanted the system to be quite clear and straightforward so that staff knew what was happening.
I see. So you declined this offer of assistance because you wanted a single system that you could operate rather than a profusion.
Well, yes, that was the intent. I don't remember having a personal conversation with her about that, but that was what we were focused on. One system, one spreadsheet to minimise the confusion.
I see. Are you the person at the Clement James Centre who asked for the records that the Clement James Centre was itself creating?
I don't remember that at all. I don't remember that conversation.
You don't know who it was? Who asked?
No, I'm sorry, I don't remember that.
Now, one of the concerns expressed by the particular member of staff of the TMO, or possibly by you, was the potential for confusion, as you've just told us, if there was more than one safe and missing list. Were you aware that other community rest centres, such as the Rugby Portobello Club, were also keeping a list of safe and missing residents?
Yeah, I've seen that in our staff's statement, and I think somebody, I don't know who it was, but somebody did come and visit St James's at one point, and I told them what we were doing.
I see. And did you try and make sure that you had a centralised list of safe and missing residents across all rest centres? Yes,
so all rest centres were bringing their information to us at St Clement James.
And they knew to do that, did they?
Yes, they knew to do that. That was the clear instruction from when I first sent people off in different directions. Right. I organised for the caretakers to, come and collect that information. Team leaders were really clear about that. That was brought to me initially, and then to Kieran.
I see. Were they brought to you physically in a
physically?
Bunch
they were, yeah, and that was physically what I handed over to the LFB initially.
So to be clear, other rest centres were physically delivering handwritten missing or
yes.
Accounted for lists to you at the St Clement.
That's right.
James.
That's the system we had in place.
Right. Now let's then go back to the spreadsheet TMO 00869931. This is the one. This is the residents list circulated at 12:21 we saw earlier. And if we look at the safe tab, please. Is it correct that the yellow highlighted rows are supposed to indicate residents who have been reported as safe?
Yes.
Yes. And if we look at the missing tab, we open up the missing tab, please. Is it the case that those highlighted rows indicate residents who have been reported as missing?
Yep. There's a tab, a key in it as well in sheet 4.
Now, if we look at some of the highlighted rows in the Safe tab, please. Let's go back to the Safe tab and look at that a little bit more closely. We can see a number of examples of those reported as safe. So if we go, please, to row 11. Row 11, you can see Mr. D. Murphy, flat 111. That's Dennis Murphy. He was reported as safe.
Yeah.
Row 51. We can see flat 143, Mrs. K. Khadija Kalufi, reported as safe. Yes, you see that?
Yes.
And then rows 104 to 107, if we look at that, 104 to 107, row 104 to 107, flat 182, the Al-Wahhabis reported as safe. And another example at row 136, you can see Mr. S. Nader reported as safe. Now, we know, unfortunately, that those people lost their lives in the fire. Do you know why they're listed on the TMO's list at this time as safe?
Okay, so this was one of the first of the lists that we got, that we produced on the day. There was and this was really based on information that was coming to us, so being given to us in the rest centre. There are further versions of this where we try and qualify, information that we were given in the day and check it over the course of time during that day and over the subsequent days to try and, verify it. There's one spreadsheet where we say they were reported as safe yesterday, but now we can't contact them. So we attempted to qualify this data in the following few days. I accept we won't have got everything right.
No, I just want to understand the process as it happened, as it unfolded. This is the the safe list, but if we also go to the missing list in the same spreadsheet at the same time, if we can click on that, please, and let's look
Same highlight.
at row 11, you can see Dennis Murphy listed there, and row 51, Mrs. Khadija Kaloufi, again listed there. Can you explain why they appear on Kieran's spreadsheet as both safe and missing at the same time?
No, I can't. I can tell you that we did try and qualify the information as we went on.
Now, if we go back to your fifth statement, please, TMO, fifth statement, and go please to page 5, paragraph 26, foot of your screen, you say that an updated copy of the list was sent by Kieran at 13:08 to the same people plus Laura Johnson at RBKC, and you exhibit it as TB6. Kieran then sent it to Rob Shaw at RBKC at 13:44 for forwarding to RBKC teams on the ground as TB7. Now, is it right that the information contained in these lists was intended to be relied on by RBKC's housing department?
Well, they knew that it would be fluid information. It would be changing all the time. Yes.
But nonetheless, subject to that qualification, I think your answer is yes, you knew it would be relied on by RBKC's housing department.
But it wasn't the only time that they received the information, yes.
Now, let's look at TB7 that you exhibit. And this is the list that Kieran Singh forwarded to Rob Shaw at RBKC at 13:44 on the 14th of June. And that is at TMO 00869954. Now, take it from me that the same inaccurate information was recorded at rows 11, 51, 107, 104 to 107 and 136. Dennis Murphy, Khadija Kaloufi, the El Wahhabis, and Sabanida at 136, line 136. Do you know why that still inaccurate information was being sent to RBKC?
I can't answer it any more than I could earlier.
Right. Do you know, was there a system for ensuring that those recorded as safe were not also recorded as missing, and vice versa?
I mean, obviously they should be cross-checked to make sure that they're not. That's really obvious to me.
Yes. If we look at the safe list, please, in this schedule, at row 102, we can see at row 102, you've got flat 176, Miss J. Abano Ramirez. She's on the missing list. Sorry, she's on the safe list. Yes? You see that there?
Yes, sorry.
If we go back to one of the handwritten notes I showed you earlier, 100352210, you can see at the top that she's recorded as missing. Yes?
Yep.
Can you account for the discrepancy?
So these pieces, there's no time on this piece of paper. There's no time on when it was input. We may have been getting different information at different times. Clearly we're not going to get everything right. I do think that the judgment on that data should really be looked at a little bit later on to see, did we try to verify it later on to cross-match it with information, from people who'd been rehoused as well.
And then if we go back to your fifth statement, paragraph 27, you tell us that, we go back to fifth statement, paragraph 27, you say that Kieran sent a further version to the same group at 1446, colour coding for clarity, that's TB8, and you say he updated it again at at 1727, and you exhibit that as TB9. Let's just go to the covering email, first of all, at TB8. That's at TMO 00869934. And he says, "Hi all. Some confusion over the list and colours. For clarity, I have amalgamated into one tab of all residents. Yellow reported safe, pink known/reported missing." What was the confusion that Kiran Singh refers to here?
I don't know what was in his mind at the time that he sent that, but it looks like he's trying to perhaps correct what was the previous errors.
Let's look at the updated list
Don't know.
that he attaches, which is TMO 00869935. We need the native of that, please. TMO 00869935. And there you can see the colour code: yellow safe, pink reported missing. If you click, please, on the resident list, which is the main list, there you can see the amalgamation. Can you confirm that the same colours are used in this list as in the earlier list? So yellow for safe and pink, as he calls it, or light brown for missing, yes?
I can't remember what you just showed me on the code on sheet 4. Sorry, there's a code on there.
There is, but let's quickly flip on that. It's sheet 4. If we click on sheet 4, there they are. There are the codes.
Safe is yellow.
So it looks like the same. So click back on the residence list. And if we go down then to row 11 again, we can see flat 111, Dennis Murphy, yellow. So he's reported as safe. Row 51, Khadija Khaloufi reported as safe. And take it from me, the same with the El Wahhabis at rows 104 to 107 and Sabaneda at 136. Do you know why those individuals have still been marked as safe? This is at the end of the day when they were in fact not safe.
Well, this is at 17. Did you say 17?
1727.
That's not the end.
Well, this is the list. This is the list. To be clear, this is the list circulated earlier. This is 14.
Yeah. So this isn't by any means the end of the day. And in terms of us collating information, we did phone calls round in the afternoon. We did phone calls round late into the evening. So there were other versions. And the next day, and as I say, 21st of June. So it wouldn't have been the final list. It would be information that we had received on at that particular time.
Let's go back then to your sixth statement, page 8, paragraph 27. Where you explain there what I think in essence you've just told us, but let's just look at it in your words in your statement. Page 27, page 8 of your sixth statement, paragraph 27. You say there, information in relation to the residents that were missing and safe initially came from those registering at the rest centres, but later involved a team of staff ringing all known residents of Grenfell Tower to pick up those who had not registered to provide them with support. I'm unable to record when the exercise of telephoning residents of Grenfell Tower commenced, but this was certainly underway by 2 p.m. Now, just taking that as read, can we next look at TB9, which is the exhibit you referred to at paragraph 27 of your fifth statement? And I'm sorry to jump around between the documents, but if you go back to your fifth statement, page 6, paragraph 27, you see that you exhibit TB9. Let's look at TB9. And can we go to TMO 00869983? I'd like to look at TMO 00869983. And here is a further spreadsheet. This is the one circulated at 1727 that you've referred to in paragraph 27 of your statement, fifth statement. And you confirm that neighbourhood teams had rung every resident they hadn't heard from. So if we go to row 11 in it, please, again we can see Dennis Murphy. Can you see row 11 there? Flat 111, Dennis Murphy, still listed as yellow, therefore safe. 51, row 51, Khadija Khaloufi from flat 143, still listed as safe. Rows 104 to 107, again, the al-Wahhabis listed as safe, yes, and now those are selected examples. Do you know why, yet again, the list of safe and missing residents continued consistently to record at least these individuals by way of example as safe when they were missing?
In row 105, there is a comment on that as well.
Yes.
All I can say is that that was information we would have known at the time. I can see, for example, on row 105, it's saying it is a safe colour, but there's a note on there, son may be missing.
Yes. Now, row 102, we can see here again is Jessica. There's a redaction underneath Mrs. M. Urbano against flat 176. You see in row 102, there's what is a redaction. In fact, the unredacted version, take this from me, it is Jessica Urbano, who is also marked as safe. Are you able to account for that?
No, I'm not. I can only repeat, I would look at later versions as well. This was on the day. I'd look at later versions, and if it's still not correct, all I can do is apologise. It's very distressing, I'm sure, for everybody.
Now,
but I would look at later lists.
Now, I appreciate, of course, that this was an evolving situation, and this was what you were having at the time. But given the, as we can see, I would suggest to you, inconsistent and in many ways inaccurate information being recorded in this spreadsheet, do you accept that could have led to family members being given the wrong information about their loved ones, as we've heard happened for people like Hanan Wahhabi and her family?
Yes, it absolutely could. So could have the lists that were up in the Rugby Portello, that the margin of error was there, yes, definitely. But we had a system in place to try and collect the data. We tried to verify it afterwards. Obviously, other organisations would have cross-referenced that data later on. Ours was the base point. Yes, I can say we won't have got everything right.
Do you understand the source of or basis of the error? How come Jessica Urbano could have been reported as safe?
All I can think is that somebody did report her as safe in one of the rest centres. I can see that we've got people repeated and safe and missing. I can see that, but the source of the data was from people from the rest centres. So that's what we relied on. As I say, we did try to verify it later.
Can we go to RBK 30120043? Now, let's look at page 1 of this just to identify the document. It's a crisis support team, Rest Centre, Rugby Portobello Centre, Wednesday, 14th June 2017. Lead Officer Keith Robbins, Crisis Support Service RBKC, and he sat within the contingency management group in RBKC. Are you familiar with this document?
No, I've not seen this before at all.
At the end of the longish paragraph in the middle of your screen, there's a last sentence which says, a full list of residents and actions taken listed below. And you can see, if you go to page 2 of this document, and it works by name and flat number, and some details. And the first one you have there is Sabah Abdullah, flat 143. And in the third paragraph, it says, unfortunately, he was informed by the TMO that his missing wife, that's Khadija Kaloufi, she's identified in the first paragraph, was reported as safe and well at the St Clement's Rest Centre, his son receiving a conflicting report from another TMO officer. Emergency responders, Carl and Jordan, went with his wife's sister to search nearby rest centres and were unsuccessful. Can you account for how it could be that Sabah Abdullah could be told by the TMO both that his wife was safe and that his wife was missing?
No, I can't, and that must be very distressing, and I'm very sorry to hear that. All I can say is at a point during the day, we tried to circulate a list to to our staffs in the rest centre so that they could see the latest version of information that we had, so that they could use that as a basis. But if it was inaccurate, then it would have repeated an inaccuracy. But that was an attempt to make sure that people were as informed of the data we had at a particular point. But it was obviously a moving feast all the time.
Did you become aware during the course of the 14th of June of the risk of inconsistent information being given to loved ones about the safety or otherwise of those in the tower?
No, I wasn't aware of it on the day. No, I wasn't.
So can we take it that you didn't take any steps to eradicate the risk of conflicting information such as this being given to family members seeking information about their loved ones in the tower?
I think all that I could have done was to record what was coming in, to make sure that was sent round to the rest centres. As I said, we did pass on a list so that people had something to refer to. But, you know, people... No, I mean, I can't say anything more than that. I wasn't aware of it being a significant problem on the day. Obviously, it's an awful thing to have happened. I know that, residents have said they also got information that wasn't accurate from other sources. And unfortunately, when you've got that many people, errors are going to be made. And, you know, I'm sorry if we played a part in that.
Now, you tell us in your fifth statement, paragraph 23, you continued calling Grenfell residents throughout the evening, together with your colleague, Kiran Singh. And is what you tell us. From those that you spoke to, what were you asking them?
Sorry, can you just say that again?
Yes. Let's look at your fifth statement, paragraph 23. It's quite long, but in essence, you say you remember sitting. This is 3/4 of the way through it. I remember sitting, you say, with a colleague in the evening at approximately 9 p.m. and calling all residents from Grenfell Tower that we've been unable to get hold of during the day.
Yeah.
From those that you did get hold of, what were you asking them? What information were you seeking from them?
I think we were just trying to see at that stage if they were safe, to make sure that we knew where everybody was, if we could account for everybody, and if we had got hold of people, we would have given them advice about where to go. We'd have found out if there was anyone else missing in their household. That's what we intended to do.
And what advice did you give them?
I think it varied depending on who they were, who we could get hold of. I remember doing it, you know, very late, about 8:30, and to be fair, there weren't very many people we could get hold of by that stage. The voices they were going to voicemail.
Yes, you say that in the next sentence. A number of phones dropped into voicemail and there was no answer. For those that remained uncontactable, what was the TMO's plan for trying to establish contact and offer support?
So the next day we did use the list, and we did do another phone round of people who we hadn't been able to get hold of. That's what I referred to earlier. There is other versions of this document where we've made further phone calls in the coming days.
As far as you recall, was anybody from the council taking any independent steps proactively to identify Grenfell residents and their needs for the purposes of emergency accommodation or other forms of support?
So as I've said before, they were obviously verifying everybody as they booked them into accommodation, and my understanding was that they were doing visits in the hotels. And sorry, what day are we talking about now?
14th,
Still on the
14th,
14th, yes. Unless they weren't doing visits on the hotel, sorry, by then. But they were booking people in, and they would have an understanding of their needs at that time.
And were you aware of any RBKC staff being involved with maintaining a list of residents that you and the other TMO staff were trying to do, or make calls in the same way? Were they trying to make their own list?
I don't know. I don't remember that being discussed.
Were they making their own calls to evacuated residents to try to locate them?
I've no idea what they were doing. I wouldn't have thought so. I thought they would be. I don't know.
Did you have a conversation with Laura Johnson about what steps they were taking?
No, Laura Johnson was very aware of what we were doing, because we were having conversations and sending in regular lists.
Now, I want to turn to a different topic, which is the experience of evacuated residents from the surrounding properties, not Grenfell Tower itself. Now, I think you tell us in your statement that there were a number of properties around Grenfell Tower, originally referred to as finger blocks, but then later known as walkway properties. Yes, and those are Hurstway Walk, Barrington Walk, Testerton Walk, and Grenfell Walk.
Yeah.
They're on the screen, plus Treadgold House and Bramley House. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And this is at paragraph 63 of your sixth statement on page 18. If we look at those properties on a map, can we look at that? This is, I think, the one you exhibit at TB59 and summarise here. It's at MET 3080905. And you can see where they are. They're all to the south and south east and southwest of Grenfell Tower. You've got Hurstway Walk to the west, the westernmost. The central is Testerton. The one to the west of Grenfell Road, but the most easterly, is Barrington Walk. To the east of Grenfell Road, you've got Treadgold House, and then Grenfell Walk are the two blocks or two properties to the north of the walkways, but to the south/southwest of the tower. Yes? Yes. Now, and you've identified at paragraph 61 how many flats in each. Now, were all of those properties evacuated on the 14th of June?
I thought that they were all evacuated, yes, that was my understanding, because they were all within the cordon.
Right. Let's go all within the cordon. And so, just to be clear for everybody, the cordon surrounds this entire set of properties, does it?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, let's go to your sixth statement again, please. Page 11, paragraph 39. You say there, the request for information on who might need accommodation overnight did include Bramley House residents. Whilst it was originally thought that Bramley House residents may need alternative accommodation, I believe that this was not subsequently required on 14th June, as residents of Bramley House were not evacuated from their properties for an extended period. Now, you say that there, proceeding on the assumption that that's correct as you've sworn it. Let's go to TMO 00869977, which is TB11, which you exhibit to this statement, although not in this paragraph. And this is an email from David Noble on the 14th of June at 17:35. So this is about 8 minutes after the last list has gone out of survivors stroke missing. And here is an email from David Noble, and you say in your statement that confirms that the potential number of residents evacuated was 845. And we get that number, I think. Is this right, from the second page of this email, where he totals up all the evacuees from the walkways and Treadgold House and comes to a grand total of 845, as you can see at the top of your screen. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. And then you've got disabled question mark, multiple items underneath that. Do you know why this was a number of potential evacuees rather than an actual number of residents?
Because it was a total list of all the information we had, so household information as well as, it won't just be a tenancy, a flat. It'll be the household information related to that. So numbers of occupants.
I see. So this was a paper-based exercise rather than a head count of actual evacuees.
Yeah, it's drawn in the same way that the other list from Capita.
Right. Oh, I see.
Is my understanding. So it's what's on the database.
Right. Now you also exhibit TB10. Let's look at that. This is exhibited to your fifth statement of paragraph 30. It is at TMO 00869925. This is an email from Robert Shaw, right at the foot of the screen, at 17:05 on the 14th of June. And if you go over the page, he says, hello, Kieran and Teresa. That's at the bottom of page 1. So this comes to you. And it says, how possible is it to send over lists of tenants who reside in the cordoned area, which I think are as follows? and then he sets them out underneath his name. You see that?
Yes.
Then he says, as you have seen, we will look to place families with children, vulnerable and older persons if they cannot return tonight, which is likely, and we'd A, like to get an idea of how many we might have to place as a max, B, compare names stroke address with known vulnerable adults and children with colleagues in ASC and FCS. Now, if we go to your sixth statement, please, at paragraph 38, this is how you characterise this document. Page 11, paragraph 38 of your sixth statement. This is what you say. To my knowledge, this was the first time direct advice had been provided by RBKC for residents within the cordon. Until this point, RBKC had focused their efforts on rehousing the Grenfell Tower residents, who it was known were unable to return home. As the day progressed and the cordon remained in place, I believe that it became clear that other residents would also be affected, and as such, the overnight accommodation was extended to them. Were you concerned about RBKC's strategy to prioritise Grenfell Tower residents for accommodation, given the significant numbers, at least on paper, to be evacuated from the surrounding properties?
Well, I think the situation changed during the day as to whether people would remain to be evacuated or not. I think, there was a period that we felt that the people in the walkways may be able to go back. So it seemed sensible to me that they were prioritising the people that, we knew couldn't go back.
Can we then go back to the email I've just shown you, TMO 00869977. I picked this out. If you turn, please, to the next page, page 2, he identifies a total of 25 disabled, as he calls it, disabled people across the evacuated properties. But you can see here that he doesn't provide any information about families with children or the elderly or any other vulnerabilities, which is what Robert Shaw had asked for in his email you've exhibited at TB10, the one I showed you before at 1705. My question is, did David Noble see what Robert Shaw had asked for?
I really don't know. I wouldn't have been looking at emails that closely at that time.
Robert Shaw's... I'm sorry, I cut across you. Robert Shaw's email went to you and to Kieran Singh, but wasn't sent to David Noble. Did you pass it on to David Noble?
I don't remember.
Do you know how David Noble got the instruction to seek out the details of disabled residents?
No, I'm sure you'll be able to show me.
No, I don't. I don't know. This is one of those questions to which I don't know the answer.
I think Kieran asked him, and IT provided the information, and David just passed it on, is what I think. But I can't be 100%. I think that's my recollection of emails that I've seen.
When you saw this, were you concerned that the council had been provided with incomplete information about who required emergency hotel accommodation?
No, not at that stage, no. I mean, there are other ways in which they were, they would have got that information during the day. So, they did pass messages to us asking us to identify, saying that they would house people who were vulnerable and families and children. A lot of people were in the rest centres, so we communicated that information to them at the rest centres, so they would have been able to go to the housing people there and book in for accommodation.
Do you know whether the information about those who were, according to this list, disabled was based on residents self-reporting in the same way Tenant information was based on what the TMO was told, rather than being proactively sought out?
The list would have been based on what was reported, but if, people's needs were being identified within the rest centres, RBKC were booking in people in the rest centres and they would have been picking that up there, is my understanding.
So the numbers could have been far higher? The numbers of disabled people, let alone vulnerable people?
Could possibly have been, yeah. I don't know that, but yes.
Did you go back to David Noble and tell him that the request was not only for disabled people, but also for families with children, the elderly, and people with other vulnerabilities, for him to give you that information?
I didn't do that at that time. I don't remember doing it at the time, but, there were so many things going on at that time.
Right. Did you note at the time that he'd only given you some of the information which RBKC had asked for?
I don't remember that being, key in my mind as a memory, no. I just don't remember that.
Did the TMO have access to that information?
They may well have done, but, RBKC were checking vulnerable people in their own way. They were searching known people through social services and family and children's services. There were other checks on identifying people.
Now, on that point, and this links with some evidence that Sue Redmond gave to the inquiry a little earlier in this module, was there any way or any link between the adult social care database and the
Housing database.
children care, and the children's database?
Oh, I don't know
on
that.
the one hand, and the housing database on the other, so that they could talk to each other.
No,
and mutually update.
They were completely separate systems. I don't know about adult and children's. That would be a council issue, but our database was separate from theirs. Yeah.
Is there any reason why the TMO database didn't speak to the adult social care database, which I think was a tri-borough database at the time?
I would imagine that's the same as any other housing organisation and provider. They're not linked into the local authority database.
Was that a fact you knew at the time?
I knew we weren't linked into social services and family and children, but during the course of our regular work, if we needed to know information, we would know to make contact, on individual families, and we have very good relationships with adult and children's services, but that's on a general day-to-day basis, not during the emergency situation.
If we go to paragraph 31 of your fifth statement, statement 5, please, page 7, you say at paragraph 31 there, foot of your screen, David Noble, you say, provided summary details of the above to Kieran and myself in an email at 1735, which we've looked at. And if you look at the email again, let's look at it. This is TB12, which you exhibit lower down, and it's a TMO 00869945. He says there, this is an email at 1748. And what's happening here, I should just I'm taking this a bit too quickly. What's happening here is that Robert Shaw, is sending a message to RBKC's housing internally, a copy to you, as you can see as the last copyee, and also to Kieran Singh, passing on the information that he's been given, I think, from David Noble. And he says in the second paragraph, the bottom line is there are 845 residents, tenants and families, and 25 recognised as disabled by the TMO. We have stated we will accommodate families with children, vulnerable people, older people, if they do not have an alternative place they would like to stay. Now, first of all, it's correct to think from that, isn't it, that you could see at the time that RBKC was relying on the data provided by David Noble, the TMO, yes?
Yes.
As far as you were aware, was anyone from RBKC taking any separate, independent steps to identify evacuated residents and their needs for the purposes of the emergency accommodation and other support? Or were they simply relying on what you were giving them?
Yeah, if we could just go back a step, and we focused on only identifying disabled people. You also mentioned families and children's. In the list of tenants, you can see where there are households and when there are children within that list of tenants. RBKC, even though we hadn't identified children in that list, you can see on the tenancy list who are the children in a number of those households.
Well, wouldn't that depend? You'd be able to see they were children in other words, under 18, I suppose, at the time they were. Yeah, you can see the household composition, and I think it's got ages on it. Right, but that would be first of all out of date, but you might be able to calculate it, I suppose. But you wouldn't know whether someone was pregnant, for example, from that list, would you? No, was it? I mean,
No, it wouldn't account for every single circumstance that's going on. It's not live data,
No.
which is why I say, they would visit the rehousing staff within the rest centres and report up-to-date data.
No, but my question, just to go back to it, was, as far as you were aware, was anyone from RBKC taking any independent steps to identify evacuated residents and their needs for the purposes of providing the emergency accommodation?
I don't know.
Now, let's go back to your sixth statement, paragraph 31 again. You say there, after the reference to David Noble, at the very bottom, this was forwarded to Rob, who circulated it within RBKC, copied to Kieran and myself, noting that there were 845 residents, tenants and families, and from those locations with 25 recognised as disabled. That's what we've just looked at. Now, if we go to your sixth statement, please, page 9, we could see how that then evolved further. You say there, at paragraph 31 in the middle of your screen, on the afternoon of 14th June, Kieran Singh updated the TMO team that RBKC had advised that if the cordon remained in place overnight, residents in the area cordoned off, including Grenfell Walk, Hurstway Walk, Testerton and Barrington Walk, Bramley House and Treadgold House, would have to be accommodated overnight. We were advised that this accommodation would be provided at the Westway Centre unless the residents were considered to be elderly or vulnerable, in which case hotel accommodation would be arranged. The TMO relayed this information to the residents in the rest centres. Now, given the potential number that we've now seen from David Noble, 845, and the significant numbers of people in need of accommodation, and potentially vulnerable people too, were you concerned about RBKC's plan to accommodate all those people at the Westway Centre?
I mean, a number of them did go to stay with relatives or friends, and I think they were also directed to do that.
Still, potentially, was it not the case that even leaving aside the disabled people and deducting 25 on those figures from the number, you still had some 820 individuals to accommodate potentially at the Westway Centre?
Yeah, it was a huge amount of evacuated residents.
Yes. Were you concerned about how the Westway Centre would cope with numbers like that?
I was told that the Westway Centre had been set up, and I hadn't been there myself, so I didn't really know how many beds or anything were available.
Right. Did you investigate?
I didn't have time to go and investigate things like that.
At the time, did you have a view about whether RBKC appreciated the magnitude of how many evacuated residents were affected?
They'd certainly be given the numbers. We'd supplied them with the information. They knew the volume. I don't think they expected everybody to go to the Westway Centre because, I know that our ring around showed that quite a few people did stay with family and friends.
Now, you say in the last sentence there that the TMO relayed this information to the residents in the rest centres. Were those the same rest centres to which you had allocated staff?
Yes, there were a lot of displaced walkway residents within the rest centres, so we would have...
Right, so that's just to be clear, St Clement's Church, Rugby Portobello Club, Notting Hill Methodist Church and the Latimer Christian Centre.
Yes.
Now, given that you didn't have a presence at other community rest centres, such as the Almanar Mosque or St Francis of Assisi Church, and other spontaneous community centres that had grown up offering help, is it right that the information to go to the rest centre, to go to the Westway, was not communicated to evacuated residents who had gone to those centres? Almanar, for example.
I can't confirm what information was in those rest centres, but no, I don't know what information was given to them there.
I mean, did you appreciate that you might have residents from, for example, Barrington Walk, who had gone to the Almanar Mosque as a rest centre, but didn't get the information that they couldn't go back to their homes and had to spend the night at the Westway?
I appreciated that we wouldn't have reached everybody in the various ways that we tried. That's inevitable when you've got that many people being evacuated. But I know that we took steps the next day to try and catch people by our phone arounds to, make sure that everybody had been contacted and knew where to get help and support and advice. But on the day, we would have missed, collectively, council, we would have missed people. I recognise that.
You did. Did you recognise it at the time?
No, all I recognise is we were, I had staff in the places where I could put them. We were trying our very best to make sure that we captured as many people as we could.
I mean, do you accept that many evacuated residents may not have been at the rest centres to receive the information that you were giving them, namely to go to the Westway?
Yes, I do accept that. And that's why, when we had more time the next day, we took the steps that we could to make contact with those people so that we did pick them up. It was, may have been 12 hours after, but we did recognise it and try and put something into place to deal with that.
Yes. And we've seen in your fifth statement at paragraph 23, I think already, that you'd done a ring round at about 9 p.m. to residents from Grenfell Tower, but that you had not been able to get hold of. Is it right to say that efforts actively to contact residents on the 14th of June, at least, were in priority to Grenfell Tower residents?
That's right.
In fact, only to Grenfell Tower residents. You didn't do a ring round to anyone from the walkways?
No, I don't think we did. Unless we did it from the office, I don't think we did on the ground.
Now, other than telling people in the rest centres to go to the Westway Centre, is it right that there were no other attempts to communicate with evacuated residents on the 14th of June who were coming from the walkways, such as, for example, the text burst facility that the TMO had?
No, we didn't use that.
Why is that?
We were relying on the rest centres. My view was, I thought people were being directed to the rest centres. I thought that was their first point of contact, and we thought that we would collect them there.
Now, other than telling people in the rest centres to go to the Westway Centre, there was no other attempt, I think, is this right, to communicate with evacuated residents through setting up a helpline or posters or any other form of dissemination?
On that day?
Yes.
We would have obviously had our contact centre, a call centre, TMO call centre, so anyone phoning into that would have been given advice and assistance, and that was obviously in operation on the day, so residents could have been given advice that way round.
Yeah. Now, we've had evidence from a number of evacuated residents from the walkways that they were refused entry to the Westway Centre when they got there. Were you aware that evacuated residents were being denied entry?
No, not at all.
Right. Did any of your staff members assigned to Westway report on the system in operation there? How many evacuees from the walkways were coming?
I don't recall getting that information during the day.
Is it right that you didn't actually know which residents had been told to go to the Westway Centre? You had no list of those people who'd had the information?
No, but I knew that our process, it was very clear that we'd been given information by the council on how to direct people. So our process was to let them know through the rest centres. So I knew that we had been doing that. We made announcements to that effect.
Do you know how many people from the evacuated walkway properties stayed at the Westway Centre overnight?
No, I don't. I know that there's about 25 in total, but I don't know their makeup, whether they were Grenfell or walkways. I don't know the detail.
Let's go to TMO 100356112, please. This is a series of emails on the 14th of June, late in the evening, and if we go to page 6, please. there's an email timed at 23:38 towards the halfway down the screen, as you can see there. And it's quite close to the text from the email from you, but it's from Robert Shaw. Can you see? 14th June, 23:38 to Kieran Singh and to you, Ms. Brown. Yes?
Yeah.
Subject, Cordon area, 2 families sleeping at Westway. And you've got Ahmed Haj Ahmed, Barrington Walk, single man, and Amina J. Barani, Bari, Glenfell Walk. And there are details which have been redacted. Now, it appears that only 2 families were sleeping at the Westway Centre on the 14th of June from the surrounding blocks. That can't be right, can it?
I don't know.
Right. Now, looking at your staff lists showing who was at which rest centre, you may recall, you don't remember the numbers, I'll just tell you them, that you had 10 members of staff at the Westway Centre on the 14th of June between 1400 hours and 22:30. We can look at it if you like.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Yes, and you actually identify some of them in your 6th witness statement of paragraph 43 as being there till 11 p.m.
Yeah,
Maria Sharple, Stuart Hill and Olivia Hutchinson. Did any of them, or either of them, any of them or all of them, report to you how few Walkway residents were staying at the Westway Centre?
They didn't at the time, no.
Did any of them report to you any problems with evacuated residents being denied entry to the Westway Centre, as some have told us they were?
No, I
Did you check in with them?
not on the day, but I knew that there were issues with people gaining access to the walkways in days after, when the police had not allowed them back. But I don't remember them being denied access to the Westway on that day.
Did you check in with those individuals at the Westway from your staff to ask them about how many residents were using the centre from the walkways?
No, I didn't at this time. This is 11:30 at night.
Right. Did you do anything during the course of that evening to do so?
Any later than that, I got up at 2 in the morning. I left site at 10:30. I think by this time I might actually have been I went home at 10:30, so I wouldn't have been home yet. I didn't do any more that night. I got up early and came back the next day, but I didn't do any more that night.
Right. Mr. Chairman, it's just before 1 o'clock, but I've just got one document just to ask the witness about before we turn to a different topic,
Right.
a different day, in fact,
Yes.
so it might be that would be convenient. Can we look, please, at RBK 30294113, which is an RBKC Beck log in a slightly different format from the one we were looking at with David Kerry. If you look at entry 228, which is now in the middle of your screen, this is 14th of June 2017, 20:30 in the evening. Yes. And it says, Red Cross, Christina contacted to say that Red Cross staff who are walking from RPC to Westway Centre have seen people sleeping on the streets who don't appear to know about Westway being a relief centre overnight. Jack Duncton has asked Red Cross to share more precise information, relocation, and flag it with David Kerry. Christina from Red Cross telephoned at 23:40 to say that volunteers had spotted rough sleepers on Verity Close. Were you aware that people were sleeping rough on the night of the 14th of June?
No, not until... No, I wasn't.
Are you able to help whether or not, even on the basis of what you now know, there were evacuees from either the tower or the walkways who should have been at the Westway but were sleeping rough?
I know that you've covered that in evidence earlier this week of a few people that you've identified were, yeah.
But you didn't know that before, is that right?
I didn't know that, no. Otherwise I would have hoped that we would have contacted them and given them advice. And I know that definitely we did contact some of those people the day after and signpost them in to assistance for accommodation or to the Westway.
Did your staff make any attempts at the time to make sure that residents weren't sleeping rough For example, having staff out in the streets directing people to the Westway Centre?
No, we've had people in all of the rest centres, but I didn't have people out on the streets.
On reflection, could you and other TMO staff have been more proactive in identifying and contacting evacuated residents and signposting them to the Westway Centre on that night?
We could have all done more, I guess. More people, more time. But I think we had a significant presence during the day. We had thought that people being evacuated would be channelled into the rest centres, and we'd hoped that we would catch them there. Going out in the street, we didn't do that.
Were you aware of any efforts by RBKC? Did you have a discussion with RBKC about how they might prevent residents from sleeping rough for want of any better information about where to go?
I don't know what they did about it, but they certainly had people. They had Red Cross people. They had staff overnight in the West. So I'm surprised that if they thought that was a problem, if that's being reported in this log, there wouldn't be some coordination between the Beck and the Westway and sending out some resources to go and speak to these people.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Well, I think it's time we stop now for a break for lunch, Ms. Brown. We'll come back at 2:05, please. And please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence over the break, all right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Millett. 2:05 then, please. Thank you.